Today I'm working on the Destiny 2 Hunter's Knife as a commission. So I'm going to get this laid out on a piece of wood here to allow me to do some calculations and figure out how much steel I need to cut off my 3-inch wide bar of 1084 to allow me to draw it out to this huge size. The thing is about 17 1/4 inches long from tip to tang. So I should be able to do it out of 4 plus 4 plus 4.5, 12.5 inches. That much. I've determined I should be able to pull it out of 12.5 inches, which ends up working out quite nicely. In fact, I've got a little bit of extra. But it does mean I'm going to spend a lot of time drawing that steel out. So I'm going to work on keeping it nice and hot to make it a lot quicker to get all that length drawn out. Now that's 5.25 inches of added length I've got to put on here. Most of that's going to come from the front here, turning this tip over. And it takes probably a third of the time just to get that in place. Now, there's some other things going on here. Very clearly, my anvil is dancing around the floor. I've got the anvil tied back to the stand better, but the stand still is not tied down to the ground. So I'm losing a little bit of energy there. Also, just when you have a shape, a 1/4 inch wide and, a 1/4 inch thick and 3 inches wide, it doesn't want to upset back towards the center very well. So what I've cut out here is actually quite a bit of hammering on the flat to push that upset material further. With the bar like this, I may have been able to draw it out over the edge of the anvil a little bit better, but it was very difficult to handle the large piece of steel. So I mostly just worked on the flat. Now you'll see there's a step going in the wrong direction there as I'm working the steel down, but that's okay, because the overall height of the blade was only 2 3/4 at its tallest, so that actually worked for me. I ended up moving a little bit further back there for this step down past the gut hook, but when I cut the gut hook out and forge the rest of the steel, that first bump will go away and isn't really an issue. I've also cut out most of the times where I'm going back and brushing the steel. I left a few in, just, so you can see it's happening. But I was doing it almost every single heat just to keep the scale as down as possible. I knew that I wasn't going to have a whole lot of extra thickness to really want to grind down through. The final blade really wanted to be about 1/4 inch, and I only had 1/4 inch stock. Keeping the blade really hot does make a big difference. Also lost the end of each heat. Most of the time I'm standing there straightening it gently and looking at it to try to decide what to do next. Which, you have to think about what you're doing, but the fastest method really is to just pop it back in as soon as it starts dropping down to that middle orange. Get it hot again, get it closer to the yellow, because it moves so much quicker. Now I was using my spring fuller there to help get in to help pull the handle out, since it needed to be squeezed on both sides. And that did alright, though that one isn't very good. So I've actually bent it back here just to use the bottom as a bottom tool. And that really worked for getting the curve put into the handle. And it's just working these back corners around to get it closer to round, and after I'm done with that, I'm going to flatten it real quick and start punching some of the holes. By punching the hole, I mean they're 7/8 in diameter, some of them. So that really pushes that back of the blade out, really helps the round shape appear. And at this point, I'm almost to length. The beginning of getting the hole started is always a little ponderous like that, but then it really starts to move along. And this only took a few heats total for each one. Trying to keep the drifts from getting stuck in the holes and trying to keep the holes from getting warped out of round when you're hammering around them is quite a challenge, but it worked out pretty well. You'll watch the steel directly around the hole gets cold quite quickly, and that's a problem. If you go too quickly, you can actually cool that steel enough to where you can start forming cracks, so you don't want to do that. But also, because my drifts are made out of a relatively soft metal, and, even though those were hardened, that little one just almost immediately loses that hardness once it touches the hot metal. Well, the metal of the blade starts to scrape at the drifts, and so you'll note they're very shiny here, and that's because in between most of these heats I'm having to take them over to the grinder and take it on the slack belt and remove the burrs of metal that have been kicked up by scraping through that hole. Not ideal. I really should get some tougher steel to make some drifts out of. Again, you can see how useful that bottom tool is to put in that little notch there, and that's helping me locate the right spot. It takes a little figuring to determine where you want to punch the hole so that when it's all pulled out to size, it actually ends up in the right spot. To do this finger hole, in fact, I cooled down, not past red so it wouldn't harden, but cooled down the outside of the ring there so it wouldn't stretch too much. Once I was closer to having it done, and could tell where it needed to end up. It also helped position it, of course. I think it's stuck. Oh boy. This is gonna be... So I like to put on a good show of knowing what I'm doing, and more or less I do, but this is too good to just to leave out. This drift doesn't actually fit all the way through this hardy hole, which I forgot. So it is now pretty stuck. Don't know how stuck yet. So if I let it all cool all the way down, it should come out, I think. But it's stuck in there pretty well. Whoops, and there goes the hammerhead. Now I'm comparing it against this template I made to see how much extra steel I've got, and that little sliver there, which only is about maybe 2 square inches of 1/4 inch thick steel, was all I had extra. I didn't want to draw it out, obviously, because now with the holes punched, that would make the handle too long and put the holes in the wrong place, so I just trimmed it off. I actually ended up using that to make a small knife later. Now I'm marking with the grinder just to have a guide, because the Sharpie's going to burn off, and then cutting in the gut hook here. The reason I'm cutting it in is, even though I'm going to end up cutting that out with a drill and an angle grinder later, it pushes the remaining steel above it higher, which allowed me to get that top line of the point closer to where it really needed to be. Then it's just flattening everything out, getting it all trued up, and that's the rough forging. If you enjoy this kind of content and would like to see more, please support the channel, give me a like, subscribe, share it with some friends, leave a comment, and tell me what you might like to see, or even what you think about the editing. I'm still working on how this really looks the best, so I appreciate you watching. Tune in next time to see the rest.